And those of you that are new, maybe you've got some trepidation about this. Oh, can I actually be silent for a couple of days or a week or however long you're here? Some you might feel excitement about what's going to happen. And some of you might feel like, that have done this a while, like, I'm coming home. I get to put it all down. When you come into a retreat setting. But wherever you're coming from, new or kind of seasoned at this, it's important work. We can feel the stress in the world in so many different ways. And so together we're creating really a place of refuge where we can practice and undertake the very highest values of awakening and of compassionate action and of learning in a more nuanced ways about freedom, understanding freedom in new ways. Because the essential work that we do here is freeing our hearts and minds from the powers of forces that create suffering, the energies that course through us. Suffering just not for ourselves, but suffering for everybody around us. So those energies of greed, fear, hatred, ignorance, that's what we're going to be working with partially here. And there's joy and there's bliss and there's all these other things. And what's beautiful about this is that just our natural process of meditating opens these understandings for us. And that you experience directly through your body, through your senses. In a way, we could say you're learning more deeply what it's like to be a human being. And so, as a practice matures, the capacity to understand what it is to be awake begins to open. And what it's like to have a heart that remains open more and more of the time. In touch with life and all the joys and sorrows of it, but not overwhelmed by life. Neither disconnected nor overwhelmed by experience. And that's really the arc of where this practice goes. Is it possible to have our heart be opened for our suffering and the suffering we see and feel around us, and not get lost in it, identified, submerged, tossed around? And so we practice and we practice. But that's the razor's edge. And so these practices that you'll be doing have been passed down generation after generation, at least 2,500 years, and many of these practices predate the Buddha. We don't know for sure. And I always look at the metaphor in a way, or use the metaphor in a way. Here we are, you're all vibrant, alive, different in so many beautiful ways of manifestations of this creation. And you're alive now. It's like a coral reef. These practices have come to us generation to generation. And like a coral reef, which is built on the exoskeletons of all the creatures that lived before. And what we have when we're on the reef now, and I love scuba diving and spending time there, this bright, alive, interactive beauty that has its time. have our time too. This is our time in the sun to explore this humanness. So like the lineage of contemplatives that have come before you, you're stepping out of the normal activities of life. And you're stepping more deeply into an aspect of life that is not about activity. Okay? It's not about producing anything. It's not about consuming or maintaining anything that you ordinarily have to do to kind of hold your life together. And at a deep level, every one of you here knows that you don't want your life to be reduced to just the practical exercise of necessities. Taking care of what you need to survive, to get by. But there's more to this life, and in your heart you know it. There's a human heart that yearns for understanding and yearns for healing and connection, greater and greater openness. So we're going to be practicing these very ancient arts together. And there will be communication without speaking. We'll be feeling each other. And it's fascinating. When we practice together, there's like a harmonic that happens, and it's like the combining of sound waves in a symphony where each wave is hitting another wave and creating this creation, a synthesis of sound that's all much beyond any individual note. So we will be literally sitting in support of one another. It's a little mysterious. I don't pretend to understand how that works, but there's something about sitting together that we hold one another in a kind of almost magical way. So I want to say a few things about the retreat and about meditation practice. And you have two immediate allies when you're on retreat: the schedule and the silence. If you elect to follow the schedule, you can put the administrative function of your brain just on vacation. It really simplifies things. And the silence is another really strong ally. And so these days together, we will be in noble silence, which for some people includes not wanting to look, at others, not wanting gazes to meet. So not going to try to be a stickler about that. But there's a lot of communication when your eyes lock, and then all kinds of things can be triggered with that. So if someone chooses not to meet your gaze, it's nothing personal, and you might experiment with it yourself. We get a chance in silence to put down our masks, our personalities that we've cultivated and have out front. And we can just find that stillness, that sweet spot. So, the schedule and silence, great allies. And another quality that's sustained me over the years is that simply of interest. To bring forward a willingness, a curiosity, a passion even, to understand this being a human, this heart, mind, and body. There's a Japanese poet, Izumi, who lived in the 11th century, and she said, "A moon at dawn, solitary meets sky. I knew myself completely, no part left out." A moon at dawn. Solitary meets sky. I knew myself completely, no part left out. And that little verse just sums it up, what this meditation practice is about. No part left out. And it's a feeling and intention that grows, that no matter what arises, and you're going to have a whole range of experiences in these days that you're here, that the intention that whatever arises, let me look at it, let me see it, let me understand it in new ways. Let me learn to accept it and experience it without resistance and with a sense of kindness, acceptance. And that may whatever arises, may it serve to awaken. May whatever arises, may it serve to awaken. In the beginning of, when I look back on my meditation time decades ago, I was a pretty harsh critic and judge of myself. And I wasn't sure I could really do this. And that maybe it wasn't for me. Maybe I was defective in some kind of tragic way, you know. But somewhere along the line, there was a change in my understanding, and so I want to share that with you so maybe you can save some time and anguish. And that's that I finally got to understand, not just intellectually, that difficulties were a part of the deal, part of the challenge, part of the path. And it's not that you're bad or hopeless, you can't do this and you're not doing it right. That difficulties are part of this path. And you can ask any long-time meditator. And eventually I even came around to the view, and this is kind of important, that I'd rather see clearly the difficult parts of this heart and mind than not see them. Because if I had interest in looking, seeing, understanding, then it all becomes more workable. I learned something. And so if you're reluctant to see the shadow parts of the mind, then you're simply acting out of conditioned reactions over and over and over. Then awareness gets narrowed down, it's limited. There's less choice in life, less freedom. And I know from my own personal experience that trying to duck my anger, my lust, my fear, that it takes more energy to keep that repressed than it does to just summon up the courage and face it more directly. You know, so part of the practice is learning to accept those kinds of energies. And we're going to get into more detail as we go through the retreat. To feel them in an open-handed way. And even a tender acceptance of them. This path, and one of the beauties of this path is that it often seems paradoxical. You know, and sometimes it requires a level of heroic effort and passion that, you know, is significant. The courage to face the truth. And at the same time, there's another way of understanding it that does seem paradoxical, and that's that it's the path of surrender. And it's never about forcing your way through anything. There's no white knuckling in this path. And that there is a surrendering. An opening, a letting be, a letting go. And attending and befriending of experience. Another aspect of practice that I like to kind of underscore, and that's humor. You're going to get all kinds of instructions as we go along, and you'll be endeavoring to find some kind of balance between the appropriate effort necessary to steady the heart-mind and and a lightness of heart to not resist the experience, to flow with it. So at the same time that you can be really attentive and energetic and careful in what you're doing in your practice, you can do it with a light heart and a healthy dose of humor. They support one another. And quite simply, as you're cultivating your practice as you go along, if you don't find ways of seeing the humor in it and some enjoyment, you're probably not going to stick with it. So you're going to be experimenting. And I like to use the phrase, you are all contemplative artists. You're going to be creating a canvas that works for you. There's going to be some foundational things that everyone is going to include, but it's going to be designed for you. So having a sense of humor about your silly mind is absolutely essential, because your mind doesn't have any pride. It'll think anything. It'll create anything. And as you sit here, you'll get a very intimate sense of that. So I encourage you to hold all of this lightly. Have a sense of humor about what's happening. And even as you have a committed, passionate interest to understand, kind of enjoy the show. One level, the mind is unfathomable, or we're going to try to fathom it. So, this from Alan Watts. We could say that meditation doesn't have a reason or doesn't have a purpose. In this respect, it's unlike almost all other things we do except perhaps making music and dancing. When we make music, we don't do it in order to reach a certain point, such as the end of the composition. If that were the purpose of music, then obviously the fastest players would be the best. Also, when we are dancing, we are not aiming to arrive at a particular place on the floor, as in a journey. When we dance, the journey itself is the point. As when we play music, the playing itself is the point. And exactly the same thing is true in meditation. Meditation is the discovery that the point of life is always arrived at in the immediate moment. The immediate moment. Again and again. So Alan Watts is reminding us here in this little passage that it's not about getting something. It's more about letting go, letting be. And so the time that you're here, it really isn't about you're going to get something. It's really about what you're going to leave. And as we like to say, it's not so much about going to the mall, it's more about going to the dump. So it's a releasing. A couple of other supportive qualities that will help. Patience. With the heart and mind going through all kinds of different cycles, there'll be moments of bliss and calm and oh my gosh, and then there'll be agitation, boredom, sleepiness. Patience is required for all of it. We happen to be in a culture that really doesn't value patience very much, or delayed gratification hardly at all. Remember when we used to be able to put a letter in a mailbox and that was good enough? Now if we don't answer somebody's email, they're offended, in a couple hours. So, just like the great works on this planet, the pyramids, the Great Wall of China, it takes time. But it's also true that almost anything can be accomplished if we can work patiently, slowly, and in a relaxed manner. And relaxation is going to be really underscored in all the practices that we're bringing forward. Just one foot after the next. from Ryokan, the 18th century hermit monk. Like the little stream making its way through the mossy crevices, I too quietly turn clear and transparent. Another good metaphor for our practice. So patience is one support, and another very important one is the sensibility or feeling of loving friendliness or loving kindness. Over the years, the importance of that has been heightened and heightened as I practice. That whatever benefits accrue from this practice, they accrue more quickly and more powerfully in direct relation to the amount of kindness that you can bring to what you're doing, that you can bring to yourself as you practice. More kindness, kind of more openings. So we're going to emphasize softening, being easy, without harshness, the best that you are able. That's the way to go with practice. So in the afternoons, we're going to be offering a variety of guided heart meditations. And all of them designed in some way, accenting one aspect or flavor of the heart or another, but designed to soften and open the heart. So we cultivate the heart as an integral part of this practice, bringing what friendliness we can to ourselves. There's a line in the Creed of a Samurai, which was written around 1300, that says, "I make my mind my friend. I make my mind my friend." That's an extraordinary aspiration. And if whatever time you're spending here, if that could be the result, that you make your mind your friend, well worth the price of admission, really. But we're humans. So you'll often find out, you're just not that friendly with your mind and your heart, with your experience. So it's a work in progress, this befriending of our experience. And maybe the most fundamental aspect of the Buddha's teachings is that all situations, all experiences arise when the appropriate conditions are present. Everything comes out of causes and conditions. Those conditions are constantly changing. But for now, and maybe just this one time, the conditions have come together for all of us to be here and to work together. For whatever reasons, you've had the resources, the time, the support of your families, friends, co-workers, whoever made it possible for you to come here and spend this very precious time. All this lined up. What we like to say, conditions are favorable. Not many people have this opportunity to simply practice being aware, to practice waking up. And if you can see it that way, the rarity of this, and not take it for granted, it can awaken a kind of spiritual fire or ardency in you. And it's out of this situation, this practice situation, that you come to a deeper understanding of yourself. And from that deeper understanding of yourself, your capacity increases. Your capacity increases to contribute in some manner, some important manner, to the understanding and the peace and the happiness in this world. Practice is not just about you. Sure, you're included in there. But the result of your work ripples out. And we all know that if we are acting simply out of our conditioned habits of greed, fear, anger, judgment, that's what gets put out in the world. And when you're able to free your hearts and minds from these patterns, even a little bit, it opens the door to compassionate action in this world. And gosh, if any planet could use a little more compassionate action, we've landed on one. So with your deepest aspiration as your unfailing guide, and the recognition that this is a very rare and precious opportunity, may your time spent in this practice bear all the fruit imaginable, both to you and to everyone who you come in contact with.